Hαίrete, friends. Welcome to Classics and Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Margaret Graves, and today we're going to be talking about children born without mothers. It's actually a rather popular theme in Greek mythology, and it's sort of the opposite of the Christian Immaculate Conception. It can get quite messy, so it should be a lot of fun. Let's get started. Being able to give birth without women was definitely a dream for some men in the ancient world. There was plenty of resentment of women and dislike and misogyny and all that good stuff going around. For example, Aristotle thought that women were just the most annoying thing and were subordinate and lesser and inferior to men in every way. And there was also this theory that not everyone believed, but was pretty popular going around about how conception and reproduction worked. So now, obviously, we know that both parents contribute material and the baby gets 50% of each. But in this theory, the man contributes 100% of the material, and the woman is sort of like just an oven or a storage container. So the man puts the material in there, it grows, and it pops out. And in this theory, the child is 100% its father's, and it in no way really belongs to or is part of the woman. So a lot of people in the ancient world really like that. And so because of those feelings and those ideas, it makes sense, or it explains, at least to me, in my opinion, why there are so many stories in Greek mythology about male gods being powerful enough to have children without women. We could start off with the primordial gods of the Greek pantheon, the earliest and the oldest and the most mysterious. For example, Chaos is usually thought to be the very first Greek god, and he doesn't need no parents. He basically just springs into existence ex nihilo, and I guess in a way he's powerful enough to just create himself. And many of these other really early primordial gods are able to produce sexually and mate with others, but a lot of them will also just generate life from themselves all on their own. And there's whole lists of monsters and gods that are produced in this way. Orion is a bit younger than Chaos, but he's still pretty old, still pretty up there, still has this generative quality. So you may have heard the story of Orion being castrated by his own son Kronos. But as those genitals are sort of flying through the air and they're falling, the semen and the blood and everything that's spewing off of them ends up creating the goddess Aphrodite. And obviously there's no woman or womb involved in this scenario. The idea is that he's just that powerful, that primordial of a god, that even just his severed material is able to create a goddess all by itself. Zeus also liked to claim that he gave birth to a powerful goddess all by himself, just like good old granddad. But other versions of the story tell us that that may not have been the case. It may have been a little more complicated than that. So the story goes that Zeus had sex with this goddess named Metis. She was a goddess of wisdom. But then he heard this prophecy that if she ever gave birth to a son, that son would be more powerful than him and would be able to overthrow him and all of that scary stuff. So Zeus swallows Metis, basically to put her out of reach of himself so that he can never have sex with her again and she can never have a son. But when he swallows her, she's already pregnant with their daughter, and so when that daughter is born, she's stuck inside of Zeus and she causes this great headache in his brain, and so then he has Hephaestus sort of crack open his skull so Athena can be born. So he's able to boast that he gave birth to this great goddess, but he got a little bit of help along the way. There were many men and heroes who also claimed to be born either from no parents or just from one parent. And we're going to start off by looking at the hero Orion. So you may have heard of him. He is a famous hunter. He ended up as a constellation, but a lot of his backstory is quite messed up. So at one point he attempts rape and he's punished with blindness, and his birth story is also really bizarre. So essentially it goes that Zeus and Mercury and maybe some of the other male gods all got up in human disguises and they descended to the mortal realm, and they wandered around essentially checking in on people and seeing how they were behaving. And there was a big famine going on at this point, so most people were very grumpy and selfish and standoffish. But eventually they come to this little old man who's just living by himself, And despite everything, he's very friendly. He welcomes them in, offers to share what little he has. And as a reward for this good behavior, they reveal themselves and they offer him a wish, basically. And he says, well, I was married years ago and I really loved her. So when she died, I promised I would never marry anybody else. And so I don't want you to give me a wife and I don't want you to bring back my dead wife because I know that's asking a little too much. But, I'm really sad I never got a chance to be a dad. So could you give me a kid? That would be really great. And so the gods basically agree to that, but the way they go about granting that wish is really strange. So we're going to take a look at this story from Ovid's Fasti. All the gods assented, and all took their stand around the hide of a bull. I am ashamed to describe what followed, ... but then they covered the reeking hide by throwing earth on it. When 10 months had passed, a boy was born. Him Hiereus, the old man, called Orion on account of the mode of his begetting. The first letter of his name has lost its ancient sound. So you might be able to guess that the root of Orion is related to such English words as urethra and urine, etc. So Ovid is able to communicate without having to come outright and say that apparently the gods just stood around in a circle and they peed on this hide and then they buried it and later Orion popped out, apparently. And he also has a little note at the end there. Well, we don't spell it that way anymore. It's changed to an O. Now, one of the most important of those primordial gods that I mentioned at the beginning of the video was Gaia. She was second really only to Chaos, and she's not only the goddess of earth and of land, but usually she is thought of as the earth. So the earth is the goddess. And so in that story, when the gods all pee on the mat and then they bury it, in a sense, they're kind of using Gaia as this womb, this oven, right, to cook little Orion for them. So it's a way for them to still have a woman, still have a uterus, but not really, right? It's kind of a workaround. And like I said, many different groups of people actually claim to have been created out of Gaia or out of the earth in this way, often with a little bit of magic or help involved. And this was a very important point of pride and patriotism for them. They were able to say, oh yeah, our ancestors weren't immigrants or anything silly like that. They just popped up out of the earth one day with magic, and we've been here ever since for thousands and thousands of years. And all of us have pure lineages. We're all descended from that first ancestor or ancestors, and this was just very important to them. One example of this is that the Athenians all claim to be descendants of a fellow named Erichthonius, who also has a very strange backstory. So Hephaestus is the god of metalworking, of craftsmanship, and one day Athena, who is a very warlike, tough goddess, came to visit him and asked him if he would make her some weapons, and Hephaestus, as male Greek gods inevitably do, tries to seduce Athena and then attempts to rape her when that doesn't work. And she's able to push him off and run away. She escapes, but in the process of her running away, unfortunately, Hephaestus does manage to ejaculate on her leg. And she's obviously disgusted by this, and she wipes all that off onto the ground, but it creates sort of this soup that's made of Hephaestus jizz and also maybe a little bit of essence of Athena since it was on her leg and she wiped it off, and then it hits the ground, and obviously the earth has all of this generative power, so there's just this soup of stuff, and out of that soup, according to legend, pops out Erichthonius. And so this is why the Athenians think that they are so special to Athena, or at least one of the reasons, because she considers them sort of children of hers. The Athenians weren't alone in having stories like this. The Spartans also claimed that their ancestors were originally dragon's teeth that were sewn in the earth and then popped out as people, which is also a bit of a strange story, but maybe it helps to explain why the Spartans are so fierce and so warlike, and also maybe, I'm just throwing it out there, maybe why they so de-emphasize family connections. They're much more interested in their fellow soldiers, in their broader community, and nobody really cares as much who their parents are. And finally, I thought I would throw in here, just for fun, a tidbit from Lucan's true story. So this is a fantastical, tall tale that he tells about travels through exotic, made-up locales. And he says right in the introduction, this is all ridiculous, I'm just doing this for fun. But at one point in the book, he is able to travel to the moon and meet the strange people who live there. And it's all men. There are no women, and they're able to have sex with one another basically through like a slit in the back of their knee, and then able to reproduce again through that slit. Like the baby, I guess, like comes out from there somehow. So basically fulfilling the long-standing fantasy of the ancient Greeks of being able to never have sex with women again. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Special thank you as always to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Χαίρετε.